So we've just arrived at this property that's been through an extensive internal and external renovation project. It's had an extension built on the back, and what we're going to be focusing our attention on is the cladding on that extension. The first thing we're going to look at before we fit the composite cladding is the preparatory work that's already happened and the reasons why that has been done. So the extension is standard cavity wall concrete blockwork. On top of the concrete blockwork, we've got a house wrap, and on top of that, we've got the Ecoscape 50mm by 25mm 100% recycled plastic battens. There's two reasons why they get put on. Number one, so that we've got something to fix our composite cladding to, and the second reason is to provide airflow between the house wrap and the back of the cladding. It's been set at 500mm centres in line with the installation guide, fixed straight into the concrete with concrete screws. Delivery has arrived, which is good news. So let's take a look at the specific products that we're going to be fitting. There's three individual components. The most obvious one is this, the cladding itself. This is Ecoscape Slatted Cladding. The colour is called Silver Birch, and it's a capped product from their former range. This is a corner trim. Matches, same colour, Silver Birch. Not surprisingly, this is for the corners. And the last one is the F trim. The F trim helps us get round doors and window reveals, but we'll talk more about that later. The other thing you get is all the clips and all the screws. It really does turn up as a full, complete system. So the prep work was done, but what you've just seen happen is me add an additional batten, broadly speaking, in the middle of each board with a 50mm gap. That's to carry two clips in close proximity to each other. I'm going to explain all about the clips and the fixing methods shortly, but that is now all of the prep work done. So apart from the top couple of screws, that is the first cladding component fitted, the corner trim, and that forms the start for all of the rest of the cladding. It's screwed directly to the battens with screws that are supplied by Ecoscape. So now we can get some volume on, we can start and cover some area, which is the exciting bit, the fun bit. So the first board is fixed in this groove with face screws, but the face screws are stainless steel and with a colour-coded head, so they blend away very nicely. You have to set the gap between the first board and the corner trim the same as the gap detail on the slatted cladding, so it all becomes seamless. So you've just seen how one board gets fitted and the processes that have to happen. But let's look at each one of those now. So you have to give a nod to expansion and contraction. The way we've done that is used a 5mm packer at the bottom to lift the cladding off that brickwork and left the same detail at the top under the soffit, which is hidden, but that detail is there. The clips go every single batten. All but the two middle ones are fixed only to the batten, not the cladding. The two middle ones receive an additional screw into the cladding. That's to carry the weight of each board to stop it slipping down. If you remember, that's the reason why we put this double batten detail on. So now it's just a case of repeat, 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 repeat until we get to the door, and then we can look at the next component. One last little side note on this double clip detail. There's two different types of screws. The screws that go into the batten are dome head screws. The screws that go into the cladding are countersunk. They have a flatter top. That's to allow the next board to slide over neatly. Interestingly, but not surprisingly, when that next board slides on, it hides those clips, so you see no fixings. You can see behind me, we've got quite a decent volume of this cladding on, and it's looking beautiful. Now we're approaching the sliding door, so we have to think about our end trim and how that interfaces with the cladding and the sliding door. So the first thing we need to do, because we can't get any clips in the last board, is space this last board off our battens using these little plastic grommets. That's what we're going to do now. As you just saw, that plastic grommet spaces the cladding board off the batten the same amount as the clips have done to all the other boards behind them. We've got to put one of those on each batten now, and then we can turn our attention to the end trim. So you notice that we were pre-drilling for those plastic plugs. The tool that Ecoscape supply to do that with is this all-in-one pre-drill and countersink a bit. And it just makes a nice, neat countersink for the screws. The screws are again these colour-coded stainless steel screws. They will be hidden, but they're colour-coded anyway. End trim then. First thing we've done is scribe the end to the shape of the sill on the sliding doors. Now, we've got a bit of a design decision to make here. Obviously, the end trim has to go somewhere in this region here. It does afford you a little bit of versatility in terms of its absolute final position. The other thing to bear in mind is that this last cladding board has to be ripped down. It has to be made narrower to suit the gap that's presented itself. So, with some offcuts, we ripped one to leave just one slat on the board and decided that the gaps versus the affordability of movement here meant that it just didn't quite fit tidily enough. So with another offcut, leaving two slats, we've decided that the end trim is going to sit there. This detail here is maintained. This one is part of the cladding, and we're going to have this slat butted up to the end trim. So we're going to fix this on with our colour-coded screws, slice our board down to suit, and fix it all on. So that's all of the door case, if that's what you want to call it, installed. The right hand leg, we position that to match the left hand leg in terms of its relationship with the aluminium door case on the sliding door. And the head, the top piece, that's gone on dead level. We've mitered the corners and left a small expansion gap in that miter because you do have to give a bit of a nod to expansion and contraction. So this is our board that we very carefully set out, ripped to size, and we're going to put it next to the door case now. So it's exactly as we aimed for. You can see that all the shadow details on the slats are maintained, apart from the last one that butts up to the door case. We've also left a 2mm gap up here for expansion and contraction, and maintained our 5mm gap at the bottom. We're face fixing this last board because there's no clips. We're using the same colour coded screws as we've used throughout this project. So we've got a few short pieces to put on now across the top of this sliding door. We're face fixing this last board because there's no clips. Using the same colour coded screws as we've used throughout this project. So as you can see, progress is being made. It's no different to putting the long lengths on the other side of the door that we did earlier. Same cladding, same clips, same screws, same process, same everything. Best I carry on, get the rest of these short pieces on, then we can turn our attention to the piece that's going to come down the right-hand side of the door case as you look at it. All of the short pieces are on. That is good news. Now we have a little bit more consideration to do. So the next piece is going to come in here like so. And you can see that we have to now leave a gap against this door case piece, unlike the other side. That's just because there's certain things that we can't affect, like the width of the boards and the position of the door. So this side is going to be slightly different to the opposing side, but I don't think that'll drag on the eye, and we'll make a very nice, neat, tidy job of it. Gap down there. Last ripped board fits beautifully. You can see the shadow detail that we're aiming for, which is exactly the same size as all of the other shadow details on this slatted cladding. Now we get to fit the last few boards and we can call this job done. So whilst I'm busy installing these last few boards, there's a couple of things that I'm just keeping tabs on. We're using an end trim here. We've cut that to length and stood it in place. It's just loose at the moment because I have to pay attention to one or two things. I have to make sure that this remains parallel to the cladding that we're putting on. It should be by right because everything should be plumb and true, but you do just have to keep your eye on that and tweak things as necessary. The other thing I'm considering is how these boards finish, because we need to make sure we've either got a butted up detail or a shadow detail. As I said before, these end trims do afford you an opportunity to just move them left and right a little bit to help facilitate that. We're using an end trim here rather than a corner trim because there's no cladding returning down the side of this extension. It's been built very close to the building next door, so there's no finish going on that at all. It's out of sight, so that's fine. So I'm going to carry on putting these last few boards on, and we can fix our end trim on when we understand clearly where it has to be positioned. So as before, we've got a couple of offcuts here just to help us gauge the precise distance for this end trim to maintain our shadow gap detail. And what we found is that it wouldn't go far enough over without taking a small notch out at the top where the fascia board is, just to help us out. So we've done that, and now the last board fits in its entirety, and this is our ripped board. That is a representation of our ripped down board, and you can see that we've got equal shadow gaps and the end butts up to the end trim just like the first side of the door case did. That is Ecoscape Composite Cladding. I think you'll agree the difference between what you look at now, the finished article, and what we started with is profound, and it looks very, very slick.